The Truth About Brian Jones, Brian Hopkins Jones, February 28, 1942, July 3, 1969, is an English musician, founder and leader of the legendary band, the Rolling Stones. Jones is a good guitar player, keyboard player and harmonica player. However, he is also very talented with many other instruments. He has improved on playing many traditional instruments, such as sitar or marimba, and is the most influential player in the band's sound. Jones is no stranger to the Mick Jagger and Keith Richards duo, especially since the two have successively written the duo. With the ever-increasing use of drugs, his role in the band became increasingly blurred. He was asked to leave the band in June 1969 and guitarist Mick Taylor was invited to replace him. Less than a month later, Jones was found dead in a swimming pool at his home in Coachford Farm, Hartfield, Sussex. Bill Wyman reminisced about Jones. "He created the band, he was the one who chose the members, he named the band. As a guide. Extremely influential, extremely important, but it fades away, a very smart man who wastes it and throws it away." Biography, Early Life and Paternity. Lewis Brian Hopkins Jones, 1942–1969, was born in the Park Nursing Home in Cheltenham, Gloucestershire, on February 28, 1942. An attack of croup at the age of 4 left him with asthma, which lasted for the rest of his life. His middle-class parents, Lewis Blount Jones and Louisa Beatrice Jones, née Simmons, were of Welsh descent. Brian had 2 sisters, Pamela, who was born on October 3, 1943 and died on October 14, 1945 of leukemia, and Barbara, born on August 22, 1946. Both Jones' parents were interested in music. His father, Lewis, was a piano teacher in addition to his job as an aeronautical engineer, and his mother, Louisa, played piano and organ and led the choir at the local church. In 1957 Jones first heard Cannonball Adderley's music, which inspired his interest in jazz. Jones persuaded his parents to buy him a saxophone, and 2 years later his parents gave him his first acoustic guitar as a 17th birthday present. Jones attended local schools, including Dean Close School, from September 1949 to July 1953 and Cheltenham Grammar School for Boys, which he entered in September 1953 after passing the 11+ exam. He enjoyed badminton and diving at school and attained first clarinet in the school orchestra. In 1957 he reportedly obtained 7 O-level passes, then he continued into the 6th form and obtained a further 2 O-levels. He also took 3 A-levels in physics, chemistry and biology and passed in physics and chemistry, but failed in biology. Jones was able to perform well in exams despite a lack of academic effort. However, he found school regimented and disliked conforming. He disliked the school uniforms and angered teachers with his behavior, though he was popular with classmates. Jones himself said, "When I made the 6th form I found myself accepted by the older boys. Suddenly I was in." His hostility to authority figures resulted in his suspension from school on 2 occasions. According to Dick Hattrell, a childhood friend, he was a rebel without a cause, but when examinations came he was brilliant. In late summer 1959, Jones' 17-year-old girlfriend, a Cheltenham schoolgirl named Valerie Corbett, became pregnant. Although Jones is said to have encouraged her to have an abortion, she carried the child to term and placed baby Barry David, later Simon, for adoption. Jones quit school in disgrace and left home, traveling for a summer through Northern Europe and Scandinavia. During this period, he lived a bohemian lifestyle, busking with his guitar on the streets for money, and living off the charity of others. Eventually, he ran short of money and returned to England. Jones listened to classical music as a child, but preferred blues, particularly Elmore James and Robert Johnson. He began performing at local blues and jazz clubs, while busking and working odd jobs. He reportedly stole small amounts of money from work to pay for cigarettes, for which he was fired. In November 1959, Jones went to the Wooden Bridge Hotel in Guildford to see a band perform. He met a young married woman named Angeline, and the two had a one-night stand that resulted in her pregnancy. Angeline and her husband decided to raise the baby, Belinda, born on August 4, 1960. Jones never knew about her birth. In 1961, Jones applied for a scholarship to Cheltenham Art College. He was initially accepted into the program, but 2 days later the offer was withdrawn after an unidentified acquaintance wrote to the college, calling Jones an irresponsible drifter. On October 23, 1961, Jones' girlfriend Pat Andrews gave birth to his third child, Julian Mark Andrews. Jones sold his record collection to buy flowers for Pat and clothes for the newborn. He lived with them for a while. On July 23, 1964, another woman, Linda Lawrence, later married to Donovan, gave birth to Jones' fourth child, Julian Bryan. In early October 1964, an occasional girlfriend of Bryan's, Dawn Malloy, announced to Bryan and the band's management that she was pregnant by Bryan. She received a cheque for £700, equivalent to £13,018 in 2016 from Oldham. In return, she signed an agreement that the matter was now closed and she would make no statement about Brian Jones or the child to the public or the press. The undated statement was signed by Malloy and witnessed by Mick Jagger. Forming the Rolling Stones, Jones left Cheltenham and moved to London, where he became friends with fellow musicians Alexis Corner, future Manfred Mann singer Paul Jones, then named Paul Pon, future Cream bassist Jack Bruce, and others who made up the small London rhythm and blues and jazz scene there. He became a blues musician, for a brief time calling himself Elmo Lewis, and playing slide guitar. Jones also started a group with Paul Jones called the Roosters, and in January 1963, after both Brian and Paul left the group, Eric Clapton took over Brian's position as guitarist. Jones placed an advertisement in Jazz News, a Soho Club information sheet, on May 2, 1962, inviting musicians to audition for a new R&B group at the Bricklayers Arms pub. Pianist Ian Stu Stewart was the first to respond. Later singer Mick Jagger also joined this band. Jagger and his childhood friend Keith Richards had met Jones when he and Paul Jones were playing Elmore James' Dust My Broom with Corner's band at the Ealing Jazz Club. Jagger brought guitarist Richards to rehearsals. Richards then joined the band. Jones and Stewart's acceptance of Richards and the Chuck Berry songs he wanted to play coincided with the departure of blues purists Jeff Bradford and Brian Knight, who had no tolerance for Chuck Berry. As Keith Richards tells it, Jones came up with the name The Rolling Stones, later with the G while on the phone with the venue owner. The voice on the other end of the line obviously said, "What are you called?" Panic. The Best of Muddy Waters album was Lying on the Floor, and track 5, side 1 was Rolling Stone Blues. The Rolling Stones played their first gig on July 12, 1962 in the Marquee Club in London with Jagger, Richards, Jones, Stewart, bass player Dick Taylor, later of the Pretty Things, and drummer Tony Chapman. From September 1962 to September 1963, Jones, Jagger and Richards shared a flat, referred to by Richards as a beautiful dump at 102 Edith Grove, Chelsea, with James Felge, a future photographer whose name was used in some of the group's early Nykerfeld writing credits. Jones and Richards spent day after day playing guitar while listening to blues records, notably Jimmy Reed, Muddy Waters, Willie Dixon and Howlin' Wolf. During this time, Jones also taught Jagger how to play harmonica. The four Rolling Stones went searching for a bassist and drummer, finally settling on Bill Wyman on bass because he had a spare Vox AC30 guitar amplifier and always had cigarettes, as well as a bass guitar that he had built himself. After playing with Mick Avery, Tony Chapman and Carlo Little, in January 1963 they finally persuaded jazz-influenced Charlie Watts to join them. At the time, Watts was considered by fellow musicians to be one of the better drummers in London. He had played with, among others, Alexis Corner's group Blues Incorporated. Watts described Jones' role in these early days. "Brian was very instrumental in pushing the band at the beginning. Keith and I would look at him and say he was barmy. It was a crusade to him to get us on a stage in a club and be paid half a crown and to be billed as an R&B band." While acting as the band's business manager, Jones received £5 more than the other members, equivalent to £96 in 2016, which did not sit well with the rest of the band and created resentment. Keith Richards has said that both he and Jagger were surprised to learn that Jones considered himself the leader and was receiving the extra £5, especially as other people, like Giorgio Gamelski, appeared to be doing the booking. Musical contributions. Jones was a talented multi-instrumentalist, seemingly at home on any musical instrument. For many Rolling Stones tracks prior to 1969, for any instrument except the standard rock instrumentation of drums, guitars, piano, or bass, Jones would be the one playing it. His aptitude for playing a wide variety of instruments is particularly evident on the albums Aftermath, 1966, Between the Buttons, 1967, and Their Satanic Majesty's Request, 1967. As a guitarist, he favored playing white teardrop-shaped electric guitars produced by the Vox Company, especially in live performances. He also played a wide variety of electric and acoustic guitars from companies such as Rickenbacker, Gibson, and Fender. As a slide guitarist, Jones favored the open G tuning. Examples of Jones' contributions are his slide guitar on I Wanna Be Your Man, 1963, I'm a King Bee, Little Red Rooster, 1964, I Can't Be Satisfied, I'm a Villain, 1965, Don't Bother Me and No Expectations. Jones can also be heard playing Bo Diddley-style rhythm guitar on I Need You Baby and on Please Go Home, the guitar riff in The Last Time. 31. Cedar on Street Fighting Man and Paint It Black. Organ on Let's Spend the Night Together. Marimba on Under My Thumb, Out of Time and Yesterday's Papers. Recorder on Ruby Tuesday and All Sold Out. Saxophone on Child of the Moon and Citadel. Kazoo on Cool, Calm and Collected. Appalachian dulcimer on I Am Waiting and Lady Jane, Mellotron on She's a Rainbow, We Love You, Stray Cat Blues, 2000 Light Years from Home, and Citadel. And the autoharp on Right On, Baby and, for his final recording as a Rolling Stone, on You Got the Silver. He also played the oboe soprano sax solo in Dandelion. Jones also played harmonica on many of the Rolling Stones' early songs. Examples of Jones playing are on Come On, Stoned, 1963, Not Fade Away, 1964, I Just Want to Make Love to You, Now I've Got a Witness, 1964, Good Times, Bad Times, 1964, 2120 South Michigan Avenue, 1964, from EP. 5x5, The Under Assistant West Coast Promotion Man, One More Try, 1965, High and Dry and Going Home, 1966, Who's Driving Your Plane? 1966, Cool Calm and Collected, Who's Been Sleeping Here, 1967, and Dear Doctor and Prodigal Son, 1968. In the early years, Jones often served as a backing vocalist. Notable examples are Come On, I Wanna Be Your Man, I Just Wanna Make Love to You, Walking the Dog, Money, I'm Alright, You Better Move On and It's All Over Now. He contributed backing vocals as late as 1968 on Sympathy for the Devil. He is also responsible for the whistling on Walking the Dog. Richards maintains that what he calls guitar weaving emerged from this period. From listening to Jimmy Reed albums, we listened to the teamwork, trying to work out what was going on in those records. How you could play together with two guitars and make it sound like 4 or 5 Jones and Richards guitars became a signature of the sound of the Rolling Stones, with both guitarists playing rhythm and lead without clear boundaries between the two roles. Estrangement from bandmates. Michael Cooper, Mick Jagger, Marianne Faithfull, Al Vandenberg, Jones and Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, Amsterdam, 1967. Andrew Loog Oldham's arrival as manager marked the beginning of Jones' slow estrangement. Oldham recognized the financial advantages of band members writing their own songs, as exemplified by Lennon-McCartney, and that playing covers would not sustain a band in the limelight for long. Further, Oldham wanted to make Jagger's charisma and flamboyance a focus of live performances. Jones saw his influence over the Stones' direction slide as their repertoire comprised fewer of the blues covers than he preferred. More Jagger-Richards originals developed, and Oldham increased his own managerial control, displacing Jones from yet another role. According to Oldham in his book Stoned, Jones was an outsider from the beginning. When the first tours were arranged in 1963, he traveled separately from the band, stayed at different hotels, and demanded extra pay. According to Oldham, Jones was very emotional and felt alienated because he was not a prolific songwriter and his management role had been taken away. He resisted the symbiosis demanded by the group lifestyle, and so life was becoming more desperate for him day by day. None of us were looking forward to Brian totally cracking up. The toll from days on the road, the money and fame, and the feeling of being alienated from the group resulted in Jones' overindulgence in alcohol and other drugs. These excesses had a debilitative effect on his physical and mental health and, according to Oldham, Jones became unfriendly and antisocial at times. Jones was arrested for drug possession on May 10, 1967, shortly after the Redlands incident at Richard's Sussex home. Authorities found marijuana, cocaine, and methamphetamine in his flat. He confessed to marijuana use but claimed he did not use hard drugs. In June 1967, Jones attended the Monterey Pop Festival. There he met Frank Zappa and Dennis Hopper, and went on stage to introduce the Jimi Hendrix Experience, who were not yet well known in the United States. Hostility grew between Jones, Jagger, and Richards, alienating Jones further from the group. Although many noted that Jones could be friendly and outgoing, Wyman, Richards, and Watts have commented that he could also be cruel and difficult. By most accounts, Jones' attitude changed frequently. He was one minute caring and generous, the next making an effort to anger everyone. As Wyman observed in Stone Alone, there were at least two sides to Brian's personality. One, Brian was introverted, shy, sensitive, deep-thinking. The other was a preening peacock, gregarious, artistic, desperately needing assurance from his peers. He pushed every friendship to the limit and way beyond. In March 1967, Anita Pallenberg, Jones' girlfriend of 2 years, left him for Richards when Jones was hospitalized during a trip the three made to Morocco, further damaging the already strained relations between Jones and Richards. As tensions and Jones' substance abuse increased, his musical contributions became sporadic. He became bored with the guitar and sought exotic instruments to play, and he was increasingly absent from recording sessions. In Peter Whitehead's promotional film for We Love You, made in July 1967, he appears extremely groggy and disoriented. Jones' last substantial sessions with the Stones occurred in spring and summer of 1968 when the Stones produced Jumpin' Jack Flash and the Beggars Banquet album. He can be seen in the Jean-Luc Godard film 1+1 playing acoustic guitar and chatting and sharing cigarettes with Richards, although Jones is neglected in the music making. The film chronicles the making of Sympathy for the Devil. Where once Jones played multiple instruments on many tracks, he now played only minor roles on a few pieces. Jones' last formal appearance was in the December 1968 The Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus, a part concert, part circus act film organized by the band. It went unreleased for more than 25 years because Jagger was unhappy with the band's performance compared to others in the film such as Jethro Tull, John Lennon, The Who, and Taj Mahal. Commentary included as bonus material indicated that almost everyone at the concert sensed that the end of Jones' time with the Rolling Stones was near, and Roger Daltrey and Pete Townshend of The Who thought it would be Jones' last live musical performance. Departure from the Rolling Stones, Jones was arrested a second time on May 21, 1968, for possession of cannabis, which Jones said had been left by previous tenants of the flat. Due to his being on probation, he was facing a long jail sentence if found guilty. The jury found him guilty, but the judge had sympathy for Jones. Instead of jailing him, he fined him £50, equivalent to £796 in 2016 plus £105 in costs, equivalent to £1,671 in 2016, and told him, "For goodness sake, don't get into trouble again or it really will be serious." Jones' legal troubles, estrangement from his bandmates, substance abuse, and mood swings became too much of an obstacle to his active participation in the band. The Rolling Stones wanted to tour the United States in 1969 for the first time in 3 years, but Jones was not in fit condition to tour, and his second arrest exacerbated problems with acquiring a U.S. work visa. In addition, Jones' attendance at rehearsals and recording sessions had become erratic. And when he did appear, he either rarely contributed anything musically or, when he did, his bandmates would switch off his amplifier, leaving Richards to play nearly all the guitars. According to author Gary Herman, Jones was literally incapable of making music. When he tried to play harmonica, his mouth started bleeding. This behavior was problematic during Their Satanic Majesty's Request and Beggars Banquet sessions and had worsened by the time the band commenced recording Let It Bleed. In March 1969, Jones borrowed the group's Jaguar and went shopping in Pimlico Road. After the parked car was towed away by police, Jones hired a chauffeur-driven car to get home. In May 1969, Jones crashed his motorcycle into a shop window and was secretly taken to hospital under an assumed name. From this point, Jones was still attending recording sessions but was no longer a major contributor to the band's music. By May, he had made 2 contributions to the work in progress, "Oughta harp on you got the silver and percussion on Midnight Rambler." Jagger informed Jones that he would be fired from the band if he did not turn up to a photo session. Looking frail, he nonetheless showed up, and his last photo session as a Rolling Stone took place on May 21, 1969, first at St. Catherine Docks, Tower Bridge, London, and then at Ethan Russell's photographic studio in South Kensington. The photos would appear on the album Through the Past Darkly, Big Hits Volume 2, in September 1969. The Stones decided that following the release of the Let It Bleed album, scheduled for a July 1969 release in the US, they would start a North American tour in November 1969. However, the Stones' management was informed that because of his drug convictions Jones would not receive a work permit. At the suggestion of pianist and road manager Ian Stewart, the Stones decided to add a new guitarist, and, on June 8, 1969, Jones was visited by Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, and Charlie Watts, and was told that the group he had formed would continue without him. To the public it appeared as if Jones had left voluntarily. The other band members told him that although he was being asked to leave, it was his choice how to break it to the public. Jones released a statement on June 9, 1969, announcing his departure. In this statement he said, among other things, that I no longer see eye to eye with the others over the discs we are cutting. Jones was replaced by the 20-year-old guitarist formerly of John Mayall's Blues Breakers, Mick Taylor. During the period of his decreasing involvement in the band, Jones was living at Coachford Farm in East Sussex, the residence formerly owned by Winnie the Pooh author A. A. Milne, which Jones had purchased in November 1968. Alexis Corner, who visited in late June, noted that Jones seemed happier than he had ever been. Jones is known to have contacted Corner, Ian Stewart, John Lennon, Mitch Mitchell, and Jimmy Miller about intentions to put together another band. Jones had apparently demoed a few of his own songs in the weeks before his death, including Has Anybody Seen My Baby? And Chow Time. Equipment: Jones' main guitar in the early years was a Harmony Stratotone, which he replaced with a Gretsch Double Anniversary in two-tone green. In 1964 and 1965, he often used a teardrop-shaped prototype Vox Mark III. From late 1965 until his death, Jones used Gibson models, various Firebirds, ES-330, and a Les Paul model, as well as two Rickenbacker 12-string models. He can also be seen playing a Fender Telecaster in the 1968 Jumping Jack Flash promo video. Death: Jones' grave in Cheltenham Cemetery. At around midnight on the night of 2nd to 3rd July 1969, Jones was discovered motionless at the bottom of his swimming pool at Coachford Farm. His Swedish girlfriend, Anna Woolen, was convinced Jones was alive when he was taken out of the pool, insisting he still had a pulse. However, by the time the doctors arrived it was too late and he was pronounced dead. The coroner's report stated death by misadventure and noted his liver and heart were heavily enlarged by drug and alcohol abuse. Upon Jones' death, The Who's Pete Townshend wrote a poem titled A Normal Day for Brian, a Man Who Died Every Day, printed in the Times. Jimi Hendrix dedicated a song to him on U.S. television, and Jim Morrison of The Doors published a poem titled Ode to L.A. While thinking of Brian Jones, deceased coincidentally, Hendrix and Morrison both died within the following 2 years. The Rolling Stones performed at a free concert in Hyde Park on July 5, 1969, 2 days after Jones' death. The concert had been scheduled weeks earlier as an opportunity to present the Stones' new guitarist, Mick Taylor, and the band decided to dedicate the concert to Jones. Before the Rolling Stones said Jagger read excerpts from Adonai, a poem by Percy Bysshe Shelley about the death of his friend John Keats, and stagehands released hundreds of white butterflies as part of the tribute. The band opened with a Johnny Winter song that was one of Jones' favorites, I'm Yours and I'm Hers. Jones was reportedly buried 10 feet, 3 m, deep in Cheltenham Cemetery, to prevent exhumation by trophy hunters. His body was embalmed, hair bleached white, and was placed in an airtight metal casket. Watts and Wyman were the only Rolling Stones who attended the funeral. Mick Jagger and Marianne Faithfull were traveling to Australia to begin the filming of Ned Kelly. They stated that their contracts did not allow them to delay the trip to attend the funeral. When asked if he felt guilty about Jones' death, Mick Jagger told Rolling Stone in 1995, "No, I don't really. I do feel that I behaved in a very childish way, but we were very young, and in some ways we picked on him. But, unfortunately, He made himself a target for it. He was very, very jealous, very difficult, very manipulative, and if you do that on this kind of a group of people you get back as good as you give, to be honest. I wasn't understanding enough about his drug addiction. No one seemed to know much about drug addiction. Things like LSD were all new. No one knew the harm. People thought cocaine was good for you. Murder claims, theories surrounding Jones' death developed soon afterwards, with associates of the Stones claiming to have information that he was murdered. According to rock biographer Philip Norman, the murder theory would bubble back to the surface every 5 years or so. In 1993 it was reported that Jones was murdered by Frank Thurgood, who was doing some construction work on the property. He was the last person to see Jones alive. Thurgood allegedly confessed the murder to the Rolling Stones driver, Tom Keelock, who later denied this. The Thurgood theory was dramatized in the 2005 movie Stoned. In August 2009, Sussex police decided to review Jones' death for the first time since 1969, after new evidence was handed to them by Scott Jones, an investigative journalist in the UK. Scott Jones had traced many of the people who were at Brian Jones' house the night he died, plus unseen police files held at the National Archives. According to Trevor Hobley, chairman of the Brian Jones fan club, a neighbor saw a large bonfire on Jones' estate in which documentation was being burned on the morning of Jones' death as he was leaving for work at 7 a.m. In the Mail on Sunday in November 2008, Scott Jones said Frank Thurgood killed Brian Jones in the fight and senior police officers covered up the true cause of death. Following the review, the Sussex police stated that they would not be reopening the case. They asserted that this has been thoroughly reviewed by Sussex Police's Crime Policy and Review Branch, but there was no new evidence to suggest that the coroner's original verdict of death by misadventure was incorrect. Songwriting credits: unsure and insecure as a composer, Jones was not a prolific songwriter. The 30-second Rice Krispies jingle for Kellogg's, co-written with the J. Walter Thompson Advertising Agency in 1963 and performed by the Rolling Stones incognito, was credited to Jones. This did not sit well with the rest of the band, who felt it was a group effort and all should benefit equally. Jones was also included in the Nagerfeld songwriting credit, a pseudonym used on 14 tracks that were composed by the entire band and Andrew Oldham. According to Andrew Oldham, the main reason for Jones not writing songs was that Jones, being a blues purist, did not love simple pop music enough. Oldham tried to establish a songwriting partnership between Jones and Gene Pitney after becoming bored senseless by Jones bleating about the potential of half-finished melodies that by no means deserved completion, but after 2 days of sessions the results remained best to be unheard, even by Rolling Stones completists. When asked in 1965 if he had written songs, Jones replied, "Always tried. I've written quite a few, but mostly in blues style." Many years later, after his death, Keith Richards stated, No, absolutely not. That was the one thing he would never do. Brian wouldn't show them to anybody within the Stones. Brian, as far as I know, never wrote a single finished song in his life. He wrote bits and pieces, but he never presented them to us. No doubt he spent hours, weeks, working on things, but his paranoia was so great that he could never bring himself to present them to us. In 1995, Mick Jagger told Rolling Stone magazine that Jones had been jealous of the Jagger-Richards songwriting team, and added, "To be honest, Brian had no talent for writing songs. None. I've never known a guy with less talent for songwriting." Marianne Faithfull reported that Jones wrote an early version of the melody for Ruby Tuesday and presented it to the group. Victor Bacchus reported that Keith Richards and Brian Jones worked out the final melody in the studio. 68. Additionally, Jones is credited, along with Keith Richards, for the instrumental piece "Hear It." However, in 1966 Jones composed, produced, and played on a soundtrack to Mordauntotschlag, English title, A Degree of Murder, an avant-garde German film with Anita Pallenberg, adding the majority of the instrumentation to the soundtrack. The only known released Brian Jones song is, "Thank You for Being There," which reportedly is a poem by Jones put to music by Carla Olson. It appeared on the 1990 album True Voices as performed by Chrysia Christian and Robin Williamson. Other contributions: Jones' Vox Mark 6, retired for display. In summer 1968, Jones recorded the Morocco-based ensemble, the Master Musicians of Jujuka, which was later used by the band. The recording was released in 1971 as Brian Jones Presents the Pipes of Pan at Jujuka. Jagger and Richards visited Jujuka in 1989 after recording Continental Drift for the Rolling Stones album Steel Wheels with the master musicians of Jujuka led by Bachirader in Tangier. A homage to Jones entitled Brian Jones Jujuka Very Stoned, painted by Mohammed Hamri, who had brought Jones to Jujuka in 1967, appeared on the cover of Jujuka Black Eyes by the master musicians of Jujuka in 1995. This being a splinter group created by an Irish friend of the former and estranged Moroccan manager, Mohammed Hamri. Brian Jones Presents the Pipes of Pan at Jujuka was re-released in cooperation with Bachirader and Philip Glass in 1995. The executive producers were Philip Glass, Kurt Monkeksy and Rory Johnston, with notes by Bachirader, Paul Bowles, William S. Burroughs, Stephen Davis, Brian Jones, Brian Gison and David Silver. 69. And included additional graphics, more extensive notes by David Silver and William S. Burroughs, and a second CD, produced by Cliff Mark, with 2 full-length remixes. Jones played alto saxophone on the Beatles' song You Know My Name, which was released in March 1970, 8 months after his death. Jones also played percussion on the Jimi Hendrix song All Along the Watchtower. That's him playing the thwack you hear at the end of each bar in the intro, on an instrument called a vibrous lap. Public Image and Legacy. 27 Club Graffiti and Telephone of Eve depicting Brian Jones on the left. Anita Pallenberg has stated in an interview that he wanted to look like Françoise Hardy. He loved dressing up and posing about and that he would ask her to do his hair and makeup. Bo Diddley described Brian as a little dude that was trying to pull the group ahead. I saw him as the leader. He didn't take no mess. He was a fantastic cat. He handled the group beautifully. Jones' death at 27 was the first of the 1960s rock movement. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison found their own drug-related deaths at the same age within 2 years. Morrison died 2 years to the day after Jones. The coincidence of ages has been described as the 27 Club. When Alistair Johns, who owned Coachford Farm for over 40 years after Jones' death, refurbished the pool, he sold the original tiles to Jones fans for £100 each, which paid for half of the work. Johns noted that Coachford Farm remained for decades an attraction for Jones fans. Songs had been written about Jones. Morrison originally wrote the Doors' song Tightrope Ride for Jones, but after Morrison's death Ray Manzarek rewrote some of the lyrics so that they apply to both musicians. The psychic TV song God Star is about Jones' death, as are Robin Hitchcock's Trash, The Drovers' She's As Pretty as Brian Jones Was, Jeff Dahl's Mick and Keith Killed Brian, Ted Nugent's Death by Misadventure, and Salmon Blaster's Brian Jones. Toy Love Song Swimming Pool lists several dead rock icons including Jones. The others are Morrison, Hendrix, and Mark Bolan, just as A House as Endless Art does. Jones is also mentioned in DeFez's song Something Special. The master musicians of Jujuka song Brian Jones Jujuka Very Stoned was released in 1974 and 1996. The band Tiger's Jaw heavily references Jones and his death in their song I Saw Water. English group Ultimate Painting recorded song for Brian Jones for their 2016 album Dusk. Many of his contemporaries admit to idolizing him as young musicians, including Noel Redding, who, according to Pamela Des Barres' book I'm With the Band, contemplated suicide after hearing about his death. The Brian Jonestown Massacre, an American psychedelic rock band, take their name partly from Jones and are heavily influenced by his work. The 2005 film Stoned is a fictional account of Jones and his role in the Rolling Stones. The part of Brian was played by English actor Leo Gregory. A fictionalized version of Jones and the tribute concert to him appears in Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill's The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Volume 3, Century in its second issue, Paint It Black. His exceptional musicianship as well as contribution to the band is featured heavily in the documentary Crossfire Hurricane. Discography, with the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones, 1964. The Rolling Stones, 1964. England's Newest Hitmakers, 1964. 5x5, 1964. 12x5, 1964. The Rolling Stones No. 2, 1965. The Rolling Stones, Now. 1965. Got Live If You Want It. Live EP, 1965. Out of Our Heads, 1965. December's Children, 1965. Aftermath, 1966. Big Hits, 1966, compilation, Got Live If You Want It. 1966, Between the Buttons, 1967, Flowers, 1967, compilation, Their Satanic Majesty's Request, 1967, Beggar's Banquet, 1968, Through the Past, Darkly, 1969, compilation, Let It Bleed, 1969, Jones Plays on Midnight Rambler and You Got the Silver, Hot Rocks 1964–1971, 1971, compilation, More Hot Rocks, 1972, compilation, Singles Collection, The London Years. 1989, compilation of singles 1963–1971, The Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus, 1996, live performance from 1968, 40 Licks, 2002, compilation 1964–2002, GRRR. 2012, compilation 1963–2012, with the Beatles. Yellow Submarine, 1966, backing vocals, sound effects, You Know My Name, Look Up the Number, 1970, recorded 1967, saxophone, with Jimi Hendrix. All Along the Watchtower, 1968, percussion, My Little One, 2011, recorded in 1967, sitar, percussion, Ain't Nothing Wrong With That, 2011, recorded in 1967, sitar, percussion, with Peter and Gordon. You've Had Better Times, 1968, drums, Mess of the Blues, 1964, harmonica, with McGowan McGear. Basement Flat, 1968, saxophone, Summer with Monica, 1968, saxophone, with Marianne Faithfull. Is This What I Get for Loving You? 1966, euphonium, with the Andrew Oldham Orchestra. 365 Rolling Stones, 1964, lead vocals, handclaps, with Haps Hesh and the Colored Coat. Western Flyer, 1969, piano, guitar, harmonica, solo discography. A Degree of Murder, 1967, soundtrack, Brian Jones Presents The Pipes of Pan at Jujuka, 1971, recorded 1968,